Hello, everyone. Hope you are having a phenomenal virtual festival day. My name is Brian Vines. I happen to be lucky enough to serve on the board of the Brooklyn Book Festival. And folks have been laboring since this time last year to bring a fantastic festival forward. And today, the proof is in the pudding. We've got three folks here who we'd love to introduce you to. And I guess the theme might be the first or last, since we're closing out the virtual day of the book festival today with some people who are making their debut here at the festival with their genius new works that all of you can pick up, by the way, at a link below. We want you to know that all of the authors in this program have books that can be purchased in that link. So should you feel inspired before we even start our conversation, you can beat the rush, because surely by the end of it, there's going to be a cue to buy these books. And I'm talking about and talking with, just in a little bit now, when I make their introductions, these three fantastic writers. So you've been welcome to the book festival. Now we're going to get in earnest with our conversation with Yasmin Zaher, Praveen Herat. Oh, here we go, Praveen. And Jessica Zhan Mei Yu. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you.
Very nice to be here. Thanks for having us, Brian.
Thanks so much.
No, happy to have you. So before
Thank you.
we begin things in earnest, as Brooklyn's book festival has gone international, I'd love, starting with Yasmin, for you all to tell us where you are and what time it is in your locale.
I am currently in Paris, and it's 10 p.m. at night.
All right, so we got 10 p.m. from Paris, in case anyone is dropping pins. So where are you at, Praveen?
I am also in Paris, so not so far away. Yes, 10 p.m. for me too. But I'm British originally and of Sri Lankan origin. But yeah, been in Paris for a long time.
Okay, score two for Paris. And now I'm looking at you, Jessica. Where are you joining us from, and what time is it there?
I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and it's currently 6 a.m., so I'm a little tired. I just woke up. But hopefully I'll be able to answer and speak normally.
Listen, you're already miles ahead. And for all of us blessed to be in Brooklyn, it is 4:04 on the old clock on the wall. But as you just heard them and where they're coming from, I can let you know just a little more before you hear more about them and their works in their own words. Yasmin is a Palestinian journalist and writer born in 1991 in Jerusalem, and her debut novel is called The Coin. And as you heard, she's joining us from Paris, just across town. I don't know which arrondissement you are in, Praveen, but as you said earlier, born in London to Sri Lankan parents and educated at Oxford at the University of East Anglia, you have been joining us now to talk about your first novel as well. So we can't wait to hear. And finally, Jessica is again joining us from Melbourne, Australia, where she's a writer of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, and also serves as a lecturer in creative writing at the University of Melbourne. So we're all talking about our first time and the novels that have really brought you to the world and to Brooklyn's book festival. So Jessica, as you are the earliest riser, I'm going to ask you to share with everyone in the room your 30-second pitch about your debut and what the substance of the thing is.
Okay. I feel like it's already come out and I'm pitching it again. Okay. Well, I think what it is it's kind of a homage to The Bell Jar. It's about a PhD student working on Sylvia Plath and grappling with questions of kind of post-coloniality, race, gender, and kind of really a love and wrestle with the Bell Jar and with Plath's work in general, and kind of thinking about questions of canon and kind of representation, and also academia and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's how I would pitch it. Thanks so much for asking me to, Brian.
No, listen, the pitch never ends. The thing is in print. available at the link below, but every time you get into an elevator, so it's like, oh, you wrote a book, tell me what it's about. So I'm looking at you, Yasmin Europe. Give us your elevator pitch for your book, The Coin.
Okay, so The Coin, my book. I'm very happy to be in the Brooklyn Book Festival because it takes place in Brooklyn. It's about a Palestinian woman who moves to New York and she becomes quite obsessed with material things. In the beginning, it's about cleanliness, then it's about fashion, then it's about nature and materiality in general. And she sort of loses her mind in the city, while at the same time she's being haunted by her past, by Palestine, by all her childhood memories.
Voila. So we've got some women grappling with some issues. So, Praveen, please take us into your realm with your pitch.
So my debut novel, which is called Between This World and the Next, is set in 1998, and it's the story of a burnt-out British photojournalist who accepts a rather mysterious invitation to have a holiday in Cambodia. And while there, the cleaning girl in his apartment, his holiday apartment, mysteriously disappears, and he's compelled to set off on a quest really to find her, which takes him on a journey across a world that's been radically changed by the fall of communism, and it's the shockwaves it sent around the world. So it's an international literary thriller.
So, just as a person talking to debut authors, there's always this sort of trope about your first book being something that is semi-autobiographical because we write what we know. And looking at the themes and situations of these three, I don't know if you guys have been completely fantastical or completely revelatory. So I'll start with you, Praveen, just because that's where we ended. So are you telling us you're a secret agent man, or is this the wildest imagining that you committed down to paper for your first book?
There is a little bit of my own experience in there, in that I lived in Cambodia, where a lot of the book is set between 2003 and 2007, and that was something that really affected me very profoundly, to be in a country that was still reeling, and still is in many ways, from its kind of terrible 20th century history. But the rest of the book and the characters in it don't really have very much to do with me, though I think autobiography and the way you see the world can't help but creep in certain ways, and certain facets of it get given to certain characters in the book, of course. But actually, I'm not that interested in writing from my own personal experience, because I think when I write from my own personal experience, I tend to write just from that one single lens. Whereas when I write about other people and other people's experiences, or do the work of trying to imagine myself into those situations, that's very rich, because I tend to talk to a lot of people, do a lot of research, and come to, I hope, a more nuanced way, a nuanced approach or insight into what I'm writing about than I would if I was just writing about myself. But it can be different for different people, I guess.
All right, we'll take that. Thank you for sharing. Jessica, I'm looking at you down in Melbourne. Are you the world's biggest Plath enthusiast? Like, what led you? Was this something that was a deep burning passion and you had to get it inside or outside, inside? So is it autobiographical in some ways for you, or is it, again, the wildest imagining?
I'm not, I don't think I'm the biggest world's Plath enthusiast, which is kind of like awkward because I feel like sometimes people will ask me,
In your life now.
sorry? Sometimes
Taking up
people,
so much of your life now, I
yeah, and
imagine.
sometimes people will ask me to like write journal articles in Plath, and I'm really not a scholar in that area, and I don't know enough, and I'm not a researcher, and I didn't do my PhD on her at all. But I am definitely interested in her work, and as I think any writer is, and interested in her kind of persona, and I kind of came across the Bell Jar again for I don't know how many time during lockdown, and I kind of, as I was rereading it with fresh eyes as an adult, saw things in it that I hadn't seen as a teenager or as a young person, and
Yeah.
particularly realized the way that people of color were depicted in that novel, and was really, really interested that I hadn't read a lot of kind of literature around that, and so I kind of wanted to write a response to that and kind of grapple with that kind of love and that kind of sense of, I guess, misseeing that I kind of saw in it. So yeah.
So Yasmin, right in your bio, the Palestinian thing fits. I don't know how much time you spent here in New York, but are you closest to the archetype? Have you pulled, not that that I'm calling you mad or anything, that you've fallen into the depths of madness, but how much of your debut is autobiography versus fantastical imagining?
Yeah, I um I lived for two years in New York, and I wrote this novel while I lived there.
Okay.
And I usually say that the character is like the worst version of me. Like if I were really to let myself go and say whatever I wanted to say without thinking, then it would probably be similar. But yeah, I mean the plot is completely fictional. And then the character's Palestinian background, yeah, I mean the childhood memories are my real childhood memories, but everything that happens in New York is fictionalized.
Genius. Thank you for sharing. I love that tightrope that you're walking, bringing the autobiographical bits and then letting the id run free. I think we all have a book in us about the worst version of ourselves, maybe. So moving forward, thinking about these exciting debuts, I would love for you to share with some of the authors in the room who are in process, meeting with publishers, doing all of the dance and circus that comes after you have your brilliant idea, number one, and then commit it to paper, number two. I wonder from each of you, and I'll start with you, Yasmin, when did you release this into the world? What was the process? Did you walk in with some pages and chapters and deliver it into a literary agent, or did you form something that was fully done and hand it over and say, all right, make me a star? And each of you
Mm.
get ready to answer that question. What was the process like from each of your individual standpoints?
The process of writing was actually, I had written other novels before that I never finished, but this one was easier to finish because it just had like, I had passion for the character and for the voice. So I wrote it in 6 months.
Oh, wow.
I wrote the first draft in 6 months, and I edited the book for 6 years. So I spent around 4 years with my agent trying to take this very chaotic first draft that had a lot of energy in it, but was not at all publishable. It was kind of too messy and maybe too experimental for traditional publishing.
Sure.
And it took us, yeah, like many years to do draft after draft and kind of turn it into something that is more.
So, Praveen, I see you shaking your head a little vigorously. Was that in agreement? So, first
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
did
There's
you
certainly
know?
the long process. I can
Yeah,
totally sympathize and
works.
empathize with Yasmin's experience.
I suppose.
I think
Uh,
we're getting some post jitters from the Wi-Fi on your side of Paris might be a little faster than what
yeah,
it
yeah.
is.
Um, yeah, so I totally sympathize. It took me a long time. In fact, I started researching and writing Between This World and the Next
Mhm,
about 10 years ago. So a long time because the novel kind of goes all over the world.
mhm.
Um, I spent a lot of time digging into all sorts of stuff. So there's just a lot of research, a lot of reading behind it. That hopefully the book wears really lightly. And then I was very lucky to be be taken on by my brilliant agent in New York, Anjali Singh, who entered my novel without me knowing into a prize competition, which I won. So the first thing I even knew about the prize was the fact that I'd won, uh, which was pretty exciting. So I won the Restless Prize, the Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing, and as a result, I am published by Restless Books in the US. And so that's how it came to be. So I had something to do with it, but not everything. So I'm very grateful for all the support, the amazing support I've had from both Anjali and Restless to be here. Yeah.
Okay, so that's our A Star is Born story. Like someone who was entered into a contest by their agent, they won the thing in your phone. So, well, 10 years later, it's a nice slow burn to
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's a long road, but yeah, very glad that it's out in the world finally, of course. Yeah.
So, Jessica, this is your bread and butter. You've been teaching folks creative writing. So, how much time did it take you to really bake the coin before you shared it with the world? And what was that process?
Yeah, I started writing the first draft of this novel as part of my PhD. We have a thing called a split dissertation in Australia that's like partly a novel and partly like a traditional dissertation.
Sure.
And so I was working on that when I was a PhD student. And then I had a couple of years where I was just kind of revising it and kind of changing it. And then, yeah, my brilliant agent sold it to Cape in the UK and PRH in Australia. And eventually it was acquired also in the US by Brandon Taylor, who published it with Unnamed Press, which was just brilliant. And yeah, it was kind of a long process, though, a lot of re-editing even after it was acquired, and a lot of just rewriting because I just every time like every year it felt like I changed and then the book changed, and I just kind of like I just kind of wanted to keep revising it like Yasmin. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That I'm really fascinated by that. I feel like some of us in the room who have ever even put a plot to paper on a pad and just like wrote a little line, like, this could be a book. Like I am hastened because I'm so old that I if I like write my debut 10 years later, they're gonna be wheeling me into a retirement villa. So a second book might not come, but also that it is a process. So I wonder, as Yasmin said earlier, do either of you have tries that didn't quite graduate to the level of because they weren't your first ones? Do you have like 4 or 5 unfinished manuscripts under the bed before these things really hit? Again, Praveen, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wrote a novel in my early 20s that almost got published, but didn't in the end. And probably a good thing too, because actually it was an amazing experience to. I mean, it was just kind of like doing the training. I did the hard yards of writing in different voices,
Mhm.
finding my own way of doing things, learning the practicalities of what it means to be a writer and the discipline. So all that was really good training. So when I got around to writing Between This World and the Next, I knew what I was doing. So yeah, it's my debut novel, but yes, I mean, as I'm sure it's true for Jessica and Yasmin, there's an awful lot of writing and many years that precede that moment. Yeah.
It's the debut novel, but it ain't your first rodeo, I
Yeah.
imagine, for all of you. So just pulling on that thread a little bit, I would love if each of you might get into some of the no's and what the rejection of situations can be like. Because, first time lucky in some respects, Praveen. But again, you've got the unfinished things, the one from your 20s, like all of the no's that you piled up, left behind before you got the yes. So, Yasmin, I would love to hear what a lesson in a no was for you when you were ready for a yes that sort of propelled you to where you are now. Any of the no's that delivered you to the point where you are now with the coin being out?
The no, I received many, many rejections, of course, over the years from many publishers, many editors. And they haunt me to this day. But what I do now is that, for example, because it can hurt so much to receive these rejections, is that, for example, I don't read any reviews of my book because I don't want to think of, I want to stay free in my own taste and in my own imagination. So I try to block it out as much as possible.
Yeah.
But I think as an artist, you have to have thick skin. And if you made it to a debut, then you probably do have thick skin and you're probably pretty persevering.
So you don't read the reviews, which I completely respect, but do you at least read the little things that the publisher slips under your door and says they like
Yeah.
you. So you
Yes, of
take
course.
those,
I read the emails from the publisher, but but I
no
don't
raw
torture
reviews.
myself with with dozens of reviews. It's too you're too exposed. You're very exposed as a writer. And
Uh-huh.
it's very personal. The work is very personal.
So Jessica, was there a no in particular that propelled you to your final yes to bring the girl to the world?
Yeah, I think I've had so many rejections, of course, and it gets to the point where I think as an artist you think of no as almost neutral and like as the default. I think, and it becomes kind of like this is the kind of your usual state of existence, I guess, and that's okay. But I've also said no, like to kind of flip it because I think when I was only like 21, 22, a bunch of publishers were kind of interested in my work. And I remember just realizing at that time that no one needs to hear what I have to say at that age. Like, and I kind of just re reflected and realized like, I don't really want who I am at that age in the public domain. And I'm really glad I made that decision because I think everyone's nodding because everyone is just grateful that that hasn't happened to them. So yeah, I received a lot of no's, but I also think there's power in like your no as well and kind of like realizing that I don't know, like what's you can sort of I don't know intuit what's wisest for you, what's best for you as well. Yeah.
So Praveen, you started this whole thing about the rejections, turning it into fuel even for what was to come. But on the idea of the reviews as well, you seem to have had a response to not reading the reviews or getting caught up in
Yeah,
the.
I totally identify with Yasmin saying she doesn't read the reviews. I think what you want, at least I can only speak for myself, but what you want as a writer is you do welcome feedback and it's important that you take feedback. But really the kind of reviews are always after the fact, yeah, because you can't change what you've already written and it's out there in the world. But super important to have feedback from agents and editors and I mean I'm sure you'll all agree, when you're writing it's a very lonely business at times in the sense of there's this thing that's gestating and bubbling away in your head that you're always in touch with that you can't necessarily share with very easily with people around you until the whole thing is out there. So to have other people at the early stages when it's still coming together say, oh, what about this? What about that? Maybe you could think about this in a different way. That's really useful. And I'm always just super glad to have people along who can give me that feedback. But yeah, after it's done and dusted and it's there, nothing can be changed. So then it's just a question of saying, hey, I did my best and it's out there and let come what may, I'm happy with it. And so yeah, that's all you can hope for, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it's like if your partner tells you once you get to the party that they hate your outfit. And you're like, we're already here. You could have said something at home, but on economy of scale. But in the same respect, I hope maybe the three of you can disabuse me of a notion that I have, or maybe verify that it's true. But I happen to think that are, and authors of novels in particular, are the most sensitive artists that there are, because it takes so much time to do this thing. And as you said, it's such a solo pursuit. It's not like you painted something and like people have been visiting your studio and people are saying, or whatever they believe about your work, or a director who's working on a film who can blame the actors because they were horrible, or the edit, or the lighting, or a dancer who performs in front of people. It just feels like authors of novels have the most leeway for being sensitive because of those things. Are you in agreement, or am I just making things up?
Well, I would say maybe yes, you do have to invest more time and more years maybe in creating a novel, but at the same time, I think there's a payoff for that in that our expectations of what the audience are going to give to our work is actually really high also because when someone sits down and reads my novel, that could be I don't know, 15 hours or 20 hours or whatever of their time. It's not like just, kind of passing by a photo or even watching a kind of 90-minute film. So the trade-off is, we're making a big demand on our audience to say, hey, come and sit down with us for all that time. Um, so one can't be churlish if they don't like it. I'm not going to be sensitive about it, but I appreciate any reader who comes to the investment of time they give. I think it's just amazing. So if they don't like it, then it's not for them. I mean, we've all read books we can't get through. That's totally normal and fine and proper. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a stack of them, but I always attribute it to my brain is broken. Not that the author did something bad. It just wasn't where I was at my life point when I picked it up, I imagine, right?
I think that's really an incredibly gracious way of looking at it, Brian. I think I'm a pretty sensitive person in general, and I think that's part of being an artist.
Mhm.
I'd like to test whether writers are the most sensitive artists. I think personally, I'm quite self-critical, so there's literally nothing that anyone said to me about my novel I haven't already thought about or said to myself. Like I'm the opposite of Yasmin. I've literally like read through my Goodreads reviews and like felt like, oh yeah, sure, that's right, yeah. I agree. Could have done better with that.
But then you also like, oh my God, I'm glad they didn't mention this thing that I know
Yeah,
they could have
yeah.
thought
And there's still things I'm like waiting for people to kind of tell me are terrible, but they haven't yet. So I think it's been a pretty generous reception overall.
that is my wish for all of you, that it goes smoothly and that people say, this is amazing, debut, long time coming, the overnight success story, a decade in the making, but we only see the shiny things. So I would love to find out from each of you what the sort of disabuse us of this idea that you like work on this novel, you write it, and then Oprah's on the phone and your life is changed, and George Clooney and Angelina Jolie get on the phone and say, I'm dying to play this or direct it. Like that is the dream of the publishing that we've been sold. But what is part of the reality that's pretty cool that we may not be aware of as just lay people with our noses in books?
For me, the coolest part has not been, of course, Oprah hasn't called me or anything like that, but
Not yet.
and for me, the best part has been to meet a real reader, a total stranger who come up to you with a book that is very well handled. I had a reader even come to me with a book that had fallen in the bath, so it was completely inflated, like like dry
Water.
paper.
Yeah.
And to look in somebody's eyes and to see that they had had that experience that I had as a young reader when books really touched me and really changed my life. And yeah, I think it's because after so many years of working in the dark, in complete isolation, with only a few readers and not knowing what kind of impact it has, all you need is that one reader that you feel like you touch them in a very human way. And that's been incredibly life-changing for me.
Very well said. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great perspective that I wasn't expecting. And it makes me feel not as bad for having waterlogged books that that just mean I love you. So, if Praveen and Jessica, have you two had any experiences as of late on the path that was like, wow, I didn't know this is what happens when you're out in the world pushing your book and sharing it with people? Have you had anything that's happened that's been unexpectedly nice?
I visited a school the other day, like an all-girls school, and these just gorgeous, like beautiful, like teenage girls were just like had my book and were saying, like I'm Malaysian too. Like, oh my gosh, my grandma does that too. And that was just like the sweetest thing that I think I've ever experienced. It really fills your cup as an author, and it's just so surprising because you don't actually expect, I don't know, I didn't really expect anyone to actually read it. And so when someone just does and they connect with it in some very real or tangible way, it's just extremely touching. Yeah.
Yeah, here I agree. These experiences of sharing are so amazing. And also things like this, I didn't know I was going to be doing this with you guys. I've never met you guys before. And suddenly you feel like as Yasmin said, you've been doing it in the dark, and now you're making connections with other people and hearing about other people's stories as writers, and that's enormously inspiring. You know, tomorrow when I eke out a little moment to write, which is always difficult when you're doing a job and you're doing other things and you've got family to look after and things like that. I'll be even more inspired than I usually am just from having this conversation with you guys and listening to the conversations of other people. So that is also a great pleasure to feel part of a bigger story of people just who love books and love literature and want to write or read. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, it's such an important part of all our lives, and so it's lovely to share that.
I'm sure we're all happy to be any little part of that inspiration train. But you mentioned that tomorrow you might be back at it again, sitting at a desk or wherever you happen to be when the spark hits. So this is possibly the most unfair question of the day to ask this lovely cadre of young debut writers, but do you have something next? Is that already like in the works? Is that pressure like you walk through the door, we publish this, what do you have next? So are you working on something? I see heads nodding. Jessica, I'm looking at you.
So I'm contracted to write a second book with Kate, and it's called All the Sand is Tender. It's an essay collection, and I'm currently working on that. It's kind of hard to work on a book that you were contracted to do so many years ago because you've changed so much, and even the essays of form, I think, has changed so much. But what I'm currently working on is researching like the origins and history of the essay, like you know that book Essayism by Brian Dillon, and also some academic writing on the essay, to try and just work out what the form is in order to start to enact it. So yeah, I have a book called All the Same as Tender coming out, so do read that.
Well, it's never like your first time, but we'll be happy to do this again at least next year. So, Yasmin, are you already hard at work on what the world is sure to be waiting for?
Yes, I am. I have to write. If I'm not writing, then I'm probably not happy. So I can't imagine not writing. There's this myth of the sophomore project that the sophomore project always flops. Um, and I can see why.
Oh
I
no.
understand why. Because I think you have the eyes of the audience on you, which you didn't have for the first project. And it makes you very self-conscious when you're writing. Like I can feel that already.
Really?
Um, so yeah, I'm trying to disconnect and go back to the naivete of a first project.
Hmm. So, Praveen, again, with the head nods, I love that you are very open. Your poker face is nil. So you got all of what she was saying, and
Yeah.
yet still forging ahead with another thing for us to read soon.
Well, actually, in my kind of crazy, overambitious way, Between This World and the Next was planned to be the first of four books. So before, and any agent or publisher will tell you that's just stupid, really, because no one's going to read a second, third, or fourth book if the first book isn't a success. Yeah. So a lot depends on whether this book is successful. If I can take people on the journey with these characters that goes on a massive span of history that takes us up from 1998 to the present day. That's my ambition. I'd love to do that. And lots of writing the first book, there are lots of things that pave the way for those other things. But whether anyone will ever get to read them, I don't know. We'll see. So in the meantime, even though those are all planned, I've been writing something completely different for my own pleasure and also because there are lots of other themes and ideas I want to explore about daydreaming, which is an experimental novel. I'm fascinated, and this is something Jessica and Yasmin will know as storytellers. People daydream a lot, don't they? We're always telling stories to ourselves, and we don't ever share those with other people. They can be quite embarrassing, stories of great achievements that we have, or sporting excellence, or revenge. And I'm really interested in the fact that we're telling stories all the time in our head while we're in the shower about the day ahead, or having conversations with people. That reworking arguments in our head maybe, and so I wanted to write a novel about that, and so I'm almost finishing I'm writing the last chapters as we speak of that novel, and I hope that will see the light of day too.
Well, listen, we're all waiting with bated breath, but as you're talking, I can't help but think of the sort of Harper Lee of it all. When you say you turned in this book and you imagine already its place in this universe that you're creating, and you're going to take us through decades, and this is a 4-book arc. I wonder for folks who are sitting at home in the audience and maybe a little intimidated, they're like, I know I got a book in me, and then to hear it's not enough to have one book in you. You walk through the door and have that book in your hand and 4 other viable ideas before someone wants to get into business with you. Is that an accurate state of where publishing and getting your idea into the world? Is it just enough to have To Kill a Mockingbird and walk away in the current state of publishing?
I mean, as anyone who creates something, just to create one good thing that has that kind of impact, I mean, I would die a happy man if I could do that.
Yeah.
So, we keep trying, and hopefully, um, you can't control it. This goes back to the question you had earlier, Brian, about I can't remember what we were talking about, but in my mind, I was thinking. Um, when you write, there are so many great writers behind me on the shelf here, or great artists, great musicians who died and no one knew who they were when they were alive.
Mm.
You know, they never got published. They would never have been on a virtual festival day for new writers. But Kafka, much greater writer than I could ever pretend to be, but died without seeing his work. Without he is an adjective in the language.
Right.
Kafkaesque,
Yeah.
and yet he died with all his manuscripts in the drawer. So you just got to carry on doing it because you don't have whatever your ambitions are on whatever scale, just have to do it because you love it, and who knows what destiny will have for you.
Thank you for that perspective. I would love if each of you, Jessica, Yasmin, and if you have more to contribute, Praveen, about what folks can do to be encouraged if they are not in the seat of the debut novel just yet, but there's a fire and a passion, or even just a spark that can be blown on to those embers roar. If you have advice for someone who is just out in the world and what it's going to mean for them to bring their work to us.
I will say that, like what Parveen said, is that you have to find satisfaction without the validation.
Yeah.
Like it takes so long to find the validation that we all dream of, even in very, very small doses,
Sure.
that you really have to be able to do it without any external validation. And I think that's where a lot of people usually struggle or quit, is because they don't get that. You don't get money, you don't get any publicity, you don't get anything until very, very late in the process. So you have to just enjoy being there with your laptop, with a cup of coffee, and you have to enjoy revising your draft on a printout, and you have to, yeah, you have to find the pleasure in it.
So find the pleasure in it for you before the world starts clapping.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because probably the world won't clap before you have your own pleasure.
I have my own theory about that because I'm a person who believes in the power of manifestation and all of those things. And I think part of getting to that point where you're recognized is recognizing all of the little encouragements along the way. So it's like, okay, I'm picturing myself on top of the mountain every day, but I think I get there quicker just by acknowledging each little pebble and elevation that's in the path that's getting a little bigger and bigger. And then you look back and it's like, I'm on top of the mountain. So we're listening and we are waiting and we're like clapping silently until while all of those writers are sitting there with their coffee and their laptops open. So Jessica, do you have anything that you would like to share as encouragement for folks in the fight?
think similar to Yasmin, I think focusing on the work is really, really important and not on the things that can be quite distracting. But also like seeing everything as like a very like breaking everything into the tiniest like morsel possible. So when I started my PhD, I remember an older PhD student said, or someone who was further along said to me, like, oh, I realized if I just wrote 200 words a day, I would have the whole thing done in a few years. And like I guess like a novel is kind of similar. Like if you just write like a few words a day, it eventually does kind of write itself. And so like I think for me, setting like almost underachieving goals each day, like extremely tiny goals, has been really, really helpful so that, you know, you just feel that there's some sort of sense of progression.
Yeah,
Yeah,
genius.
I absolutely echo that. You just got to do it. And hey, even if you do write a paragraph and it stinks and you rip it up and throw it in the bin, that's progress too, because you've actually learned something about what you shouldn't be doing, and so you start the next day from a better place. Yeah. So you just gotta, if you've got the ambition, you've got the passion for it, and you really want to do it, just do it. That's it. I mean, that's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's just a piece of paper and a pen, or your laptop, as Jasmine said. You just it's there for you. It's just about sitting down and bashing out something.
No, it's good. And like you said, you cleared all of the bad things and you're ready to move forward. Sometimes you got to clear the bad things before all of the good stuff flows out of the way. So I and I see we're probably about 2 minutes away from our close, so we won't get into readings, but I would love it again if each of you could just make a direct to our audience appeal for them to go down and click below to get those books into their lives. So I'll start with you, Praveen, and just ask you to give us your best book festival reason why and entice us into buying your debut novel Between This World and the Next.
Wow. Why should you buy it? I think if you're like me, kind of dazzled by the complexity of the world and the kind of horrors we're exposed to on a daily basis. The main character in my book is a photojournalist. So it's about what is it like to live in a world where you're surrounded by the stories of other people's suffering? How do you do anything about that? What moral responsibility do you have? And in the book, the character has a chance to change someone else's life, someone from a very different background than him. And the question is, what does he do and what sacrifice will that take? And so I think it's an extraordinary book in extraordinary circumstances, but the human question at the root of it is something that I think concerns all of us. So I hope readers are touched by that too.
Thank you for that. That is what you call a tease, ladies and gentle people of the world. So, Yasmin, entice us into getting
How
that.
would I how would I entice you? Okay, I would say that me as a reader, I have a very short attention span and I find it hard to get into books.
Mhm.
So I tried to write a book that would kind of capture the reader. And I've been like, readers told me that it's kind of a page turner and it's an easy read. So if you're looking for something that is yeah, something that is low maintenance in terms of what it requires of you, but still has some gravitas, then I hope that's the kind of book that I wrote.
It's the kind of book you want to take into the bathtub with you.
Until
Clearly.
it gets cold, until the bath water is
So
cold.
the bath is frigid. So, Jessica, let's finish up with you, please.
I'm gonna show, wait, the cover, sorry. So I show it before. It's a beautiful cover, so you should get it because it's kind of a beautiful, there you go, object. But I mean, don't buy it if you don't want to. Like, I mean, I'm Australian. I can't sit there and tell people buy my book. It's just against my nature. So maybe don't get it. Like, I think that's fine too. You can get it from the library maybe if it's too expensive or,
Oh,
I mean, don't buy
definitely
it.
get them from the library. Libraries are so important. You must. Yes, library borrowers even better than people who pay for it, I say. But anyway, there we go. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah. So don't buy it. Just don't.
Well, listen, even if you do buy it, I urge and implore you to reach out to each of your respective libraries and tell them to add it to their rosters so the folks who aren't as fortunate as you are to have that lovely private collection of debut novels can have a chance to read it for the low, low price of free 99. Thank you. The public libraries are the best things that we ever invented.
Absolutely.
So in order to wrap this up, I want to remind everyone that, again, you can order those books in the links below before you call the library and tell them, I just read this, it's phenomenal, add it to the stacks. But thank you to Yasmin, Praveen, and Jessica. Please remember you can buy those books. You can also make a donation. We would be thrilled if you help the Brooklyn Book Festival stay free and open to everyone around the world, including these folks who have joined us via technology. And we're celebrating 19 years of presenting free literary programming, and it doesn't happen by accident. So if you could find your way to supporting us with a donation, that would be even more phenomenal. And just a reminder, if you are here in the New York City area this very week, join us at our citywide bookends events. And Praveen, you're also going to be taking part in one on Fridays. So
That's right. Yeah.
you might want to come in and see more. But we're having bookend events citywide all week. And then Children's Day and Festival Day are going to take place September 28th and 29th right in downtown Brooklyn. So thank you all so much for making time, for waking up with us and getting ready for the evening before you shut it down over in Paris. This has been really a pleasure to get to know all of you, and we can now say that we knew you when. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on Festival Day, everyone. Enjoy your reading.
Thank you very much. Thank
Very
you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.